This is the gospel according to John. As Jesus walked along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?"
Neither this man nor his parents sinned. He was born blind so that God's works might be revealed in him. We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world.
When he had said this, he spat on the ground and made mud with the saliva and spread the mud on the man's eyes, saying to him,
"Go, wash in the pool of Siloam."
Then he went and washed and came back able to see. The neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar began to ask, "Is this not the man who used to sit and beg?"
"Oh yeah, I'm the man."
Some were saying, "It is he." Others were saying,
Nah, but someone like him.
I'm the man.
Then how were your eyes opened?
Well, the man called Jesus made mud, spread it on my eyes, and said to me, "Go to Siloam and wash." So I went, I washed, and I received my sight.
Then where is he?
I don't know.
They brought to the Pharisees the man who had formerly been blind. Now it was a Sabbath day when Jesus made the mud and opened his eyes. Then the Pharisees also began to ask him how he had received his sight. He said to them,
Well, he put mud on my eyes, then I washed, now I see.
But the man is not from God, for he does not observe the Sabbath. How can a man who is a sinner perform such signs?
and they were divided.
What do you say about him? It was your eyes he opened.
I'm going to say he's a prophet.
The people did not believe that he had been blind and had received his sight until they called the parents of the man who had received his sight and asked them,
Is this your son? You say was born blind? Then how does he now see?
We know that this is our son and that he was born blind, but we don't know how it is that he now sees, nor do we know who opened his eyes. Ask him. He is of age. He will speak for himself.
His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jewish leaders, for the leaders had already agreed that anyone who confessed Jesus to be the Messiah would be put out of the synagogue. Therefore, his parents said,
Hey, he is of age. Ask him.
So for the second time, they called the man who had been blind, and they said to him, Give glory to God. We know that this man is a sinner.
I don't know whether he's a sinner. One thing I do know, that though I was blind, now I see.
What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes?
I already told you, but you wouldn't listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciple?
You are his disciple. We are disciples of Moses. We know that God has spoken to Moses, but as for this man, we do not know where he comes from.
Well, that's an astonishing thing. You don't know where he comes from, and yet he opened my eyes. We know that God doesn't listen to sinners, but he does listen to one who worships him and obeys his will. Never since the world began has it been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a person born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing.
You were born entirely in sins, and are you trying to teach us?
And they drove him out. Jesus heard that they drove him out, and when he found him, he said,
Do you believe in the Son of Man?
And who is he, sir? Tell me, so that I may believe in him.
You have seen him, and the one speaking with you is he.
Lord, I believe.
And he worshipped him.
I came into this world for judgment, so that those who do not see may see, and those who do see may become blind.
Surely we are not blind, are we?
If you were blind, you would not have sin. But now that you say, we see, your sin remains.
The human brain is amazing, isn't it? But who here would agree with that? The human brain is amazing. Okay, how many of us have witnessed an infant who is initially born with just this jumbled mass of neurons go from communicating with gurgling and coos, some smiles, to then speaking in complete sentences? That's the human brain being amazing. Who has seen a gifted pianist like Caleb or Jane or Dan, who might be joining us online? They look at this piece of paper and it has circles and dashes on it, and somehow that tells their fingers how to pound on some keys, and we receive the beautiful music. That is the human brain being amazing. Brains are also incredibly plastic, resilient. They can rewire, they can heal. We know that if one part of the brain gets injured in an accident or through a stroke, that a whole different part of the brain can rewire and take over the functions that the injured part used to control. We also know that when the brain and the body that it controls goes through insult after insult after insult, emotionally, physically, psychologically, spiritually, the brain often finds a way to keep going, to keep us from breaking down in despair. I am so grateful for God's majestic work in creating the human brain, because without this ability to remold, remake, resurrect, I don't know that we all would be sitting here together this morning. What do I mean by that? On Friday night, I went to Temple Beth Israel. That is the local synagogue in town. I went with our very own Deacon Claire and Kathleen, and we were there to show solidarity to our Jewish friends who continue to experience persecution in our town at the hands of white nationalists. During her usual Shabbat address, so Shabbat is Sabbath, that goes from Friday at sundown to Saturday at sundown, Rabbi Ruhi reminded us that it had been 3 years, almost exactly, since COVID had begun to wreak havoc in our part of the world. Almost 3 years, exactly. And I felt taken aback by this, because despite the fact that COVID-19 was this completely destabilizing reality that we had all faced, I had somehow lost track of the fact that we made the decision to stop worshiping in person on March 12th, 2020, almost exactly 3 years ago. If you'll recall, for those of you who are part of this community or another, it was the middle of Lent. And our Lenten journeys took a sudden and abrupt turn to being Lenten vigils. We were all at home. We were confused. We had more questions than answers. We were wondering what was going on. We were scared. And we were looking for reassurance that everything would be all right in the end. Now we're 3 years into this new reality, and at least my brain has found a way to move forward in spite of the difficulty of the past 3 years. Can you all resonate with that? Like, there's some way we've been able to move forward. And yet it's difficult to articulate exactly what we've been through. Deacon Claire, in her sermon last week, said that about 93% of communication is nonverbal. So this is how I feel when I think about COVID. I will look forward to seeing or hearing your version of this later. When we look at our gospel reading for today, we see that the community that is depicted in this passage was also going through a chaotic and confusing experience. That was a doozy of a reading, right? I mean, during Lent, we get these long passages from John, and so I am very grateful to all of our volunteers who helped break that up a little bit for us. The heart of the issue in this story is this. Everybody was confused and scared, and consequently, they weren't acting out of their best selves. So take the disciples, for starters. The passage begins with the disciples asking Jesus, "Who sinned to make this man blind from birth?" You know, and when we read this, if we were just reading the Bible for ourselves, we might hear it as a philosophical question, right? Who sinned to make this man blind from birth? Let's take it under advisement. But actually, can you imagine the angst that was underneath that? The disciples were almost scared, asking who sinned to make this thing happen. Right? And so they thought someone had to be at fault. Now, Jesus responded that no one had sinned. Right? He corrected the disciples' confused notion, and he taught the disciples a different way to understand what causes physical challenges. But the scene doesn't end there. Shortly after this, Jesus goes. He goes and meets the man born blind. He puts dirt mixed with saliva in the man's eyes, and he tells the man to go wash in the pool of Siloam. The man could now see. So was he jumping and leaping and praising God? Isn't there a song about that? Did any of you sing that in Sunday school? Yeah, different story, but still, that we'd imagine that's what would be happening, right? No, he was not celebrating. He was not. Even though he had been cured of a condition that had kept him on the outskirts of his community all of his life. Instead, he found himself not celebrating, but arguing with the Pharisees, the religious leaders in his town. These religious leaders leave the man feeling more anxious than joyful. They want him to deny Jesus. They want him to deny this person who had just worked a miracle in his life. And even though the man was afraid of the Pharisees, he could not bring himself to deny Jesus. The agony, chaos, confusion doesn't end there. Instead of being happy for the man and his family, members of their community, their neighbors, don't offer the man welcome. Instead, they begin to grill the man's parents about what had happened. Is this your son, who you say was born blind? How does he now see? The parents try to redirect the questions. We don't know. Go ask him. He's old enough. He's an adult. But the neighbors persisted. They were all feeling uncertain and scared. Why? Being associated with this upstart healer, teacher who claimed God's authority was dangerous for the parents, for the neighbors, for the man. The text tells us what's going on. They were afraid of the Jewish leaders, for the leaders had already agreed that anyone who confessed Jesus to be the Messiah would be put out of the synagogue. To be put out of the synagogue was to experience not only religious and social isolation, it was to experience anxiety, a lack of communal stability, perhaps even economic stability. When I think about that, it's not unlike what we all experienced at the beginning weeks, months of the pandemic. Social isolation, a lack of communal stability. We were alone. And how did that feel? So the Pharisees, watching all of this go down, go on to argue some more with the poor man, this man who had been healed. After they realized that indeed he had experienced a miracle, this had happened, they cast the man out of the community again. Again. The man can't catch a break. First, he was isolated because he had been born blind, and now he was isolated because Jesus had made him see. Right? Chaos, hurt, big feelings, as Kathleen likes to say. But then Jesus finds the man on the outskirts of town. And Jesus has what I imagine to be an incredibly intimate conversation with the man. Do you believe in the Son of Man? Jesus says. And the man says, who is he, sir? Tell me so I may believe in him. And Jesus responds, you have seen him, and the one speaking with you is he. And the man said, Lord, I believe. And he worshiped him. I'm tempted to say that this shows the glory of the human brain again. The man doesn't completely give up, even after being cast out for a second time. His rejection does not cause the man to become embittered, unable to go on. The man perseveres and worships Jesus. And yet, perhaps it's more accurate to say that this passage reveals to us the goodness of God. Jesus meets the man, perhaps at the limits of his ability to hope, and provides the reassurance that the man needs to keep going, to stay in relationship with God, to find his way past the fear, the doubt, the confusion that his journey through life had entailed. This interchange between the man and Jesus reminds me of our psalm for this morning, the famous Psalm 23. The psalmist begins, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. The psalmist is acknowledging the difficulties of life, the despair that the psalmist is experiencing. And yet, your rod and your staff, they comfort me, the psalmist continues. This juxtaposition of deathly shadow and comforting staff, it's a beautiful image for a life of faith because it represents the interplay between acknowledging difficulty and receiving God's reassurance. Whether the valley of the shadow of death stretches out in front of us, or whether it's a disturbing image in our rearview mirror, it is the hope that the Good Shepherd is beside us that helps us continue our journeys through life's challenges. This morning, as we sit in a place of remembering all that we've been through, my prayer is that we can remember that we did not and do not go through this alone. God promises to be present with us, to weep with us, to mourn with us, to laugh, to persevere with us, coming to us when we are on the outskirts of our abilities to hope. The last verse of the hymn that the choir is going to sing shortly feels like a prayer, and it is particularly appropriate for our themes this morning. You'll be able to follow along with the words if you want to. They're in the back of the bulletin, but let me just read this last verse to you. I fear in the dark and the doubt of my journey, but courage will come with the sound of your steps by my side, and with all of the family you've saved by your love. We'll sing to your dawn at the end of our journey. We are gathered here together after a long journey, knowing that we have more to face ahead. But we are a family, saved by God's love, and we'll keep singing together through it all. Amen.